Welcome everyone to another edition of Play It Through, and on this edition it's a special bootleg edition as we are doing Super Donkey Kong for the Famicom. This is a Chinese bootleg that takes several of the characters, sprites, and like from Donkey Kong Land for the Game Boy and putting it into a Famicom game. The game is only 5 levels long, well 15 levels long, but it's only 5 stages and you repeat them 3 times and then you get the game's ending. Well, what the game, I guess, considers an ending. I think one of the coolest things and one of the few really bright spots for the game is seeing like the enemy roll call at the title screen before jumping into the actual gameplay. Now, like Donkey Kong Land, you can only have one character on the screen at once, but you do have both Diddy and Donkey, and they can jump and do their special move like rolling with Donkey Kong and doing the handstand cartwheel with Diddy Kong. Hit detection in this game is, no surprise, absolutely terrible. Sometimes it really works in your advantage, and other times, of course, will be a hindrance. So, when you're watching this playthrough, if you notice that it should be a hit to me, or vice versa, and it doesn't happen, just know that, yes, the hit detection is very, very bad. Controls are also, of course, no surprise, very sluggish, and not really the best as far as handling is concerned. But overall, I have played worse when it comes to pirated or bootlegged games on the Famicom. One thing I will give the creators a little bit of credit for is the fact that they did at least use different backdrops and different styles of levels for each of the 5 stages included, with the first one being the pirate ship type theme. We saw more of these levels in the second Donkey Kong Country game, but I'm not positive. It's been a little bit since I played Donkey Kong Land, so I'm not sure if one of these types of levels actually appear in that as well, as it's been quite a while since I actually played through those games. The second level is a more traditional kind of jungle-themed level that you would see in many of the areas of Donkey Kong Country 1, mostly in the first world, basically. We then will get to go to a snow-themed level and a temple-themed stage before finishing up with a underwater-based level, which some people aren't a big fan of, but I was always a big fan of the underwater levels in Donkey Kong Country 1, mostly just because of the music, of course. Aquatic Ambience is one of the best video game songs probably ever, at least in my opinion. There is no barrels to use in this particular pirated cart. One of the big kind of staples of what made Donkey Kong's platforming stand out was, of course, using barrels to blast your way through into other barrels and be able to get through levels that way. But none of those are included in this. I guess that this was outside of the realm of what they were able to do with whatever it was they were doing with this particular game altogether. There is so many bootlegs out there for Mario and Donkey Kong and many of the other Nintendo franchises. I figure it's far time I start giving a look to some of these as they become quite popular, meme-worthy, and the like, and so over the next few months I'm going to be digging into some of the pirated ones, the ones I find most interesting or weirdest, like where Mario has been placed into all kinds of different games. In fact, there's like at least 17 or 18 numbered Mario pirated bootleg titles on the NES, so I'll probably get to a few of those as time goes on. If there's one in particular you want to see me cover, of course, put it down in the comments, that way I kind of get an idea which ones you guys like to see more or less. The fourth level of the game is a temple-themed stage, but it's more pretty much the same of us jumping over some of the bees, the zingers, snakes on the ground, and the kremlins. And we at least have a couple different versions of like the critters here, the blue jumping ones and the green ones that kind of just walk. Some of the animations for them and like hit detection of their walk cycles isn't quite there, because in the second level in particular, sometimes the critters will actually just kind of like walk through the ground and go off screen that way, which is quite humorous. I also find it funny, though, that the creators went ahead and put Naughty, the, like, Gopher Beaver-like enemy, in the opening, that whole, like, montage of all the enemies in the game, but doesn't actually appear anywhere in the pirated game, just on that title screen, or that roll call, or whatever you want to call it. So, another one of those kind of, like, weird little things with here. Now, next up is the underwater level, which is one of the more interestingly designed stages. Actually, swimming is not that bad. You're a bit heavier than probably you would like, so kind of maneuvering around is a bit more difficult. You can get caught on the floor and ceiling really easily. This level is also more of a maze-like level, where you have to figure out which of the paths you need to go in order to get through, because a bunch of them lead to dead ends or lead you back around. So thankfully, after doing it just a couple of times, and since you have to do the levels 3 times each anyway, I was able to learn the maze pretty easily. But the first time through, I ran into quite a few dead ends on my attempts of trying to get through this level. The fish and their sprites for swimming with them and the sharks actually isn't too bad, and the same goes for the clam enemies when they end up opening up and send out the 3-shot spread shot in the 2 main areas, like the big open areas, the very beginning of the level and right here at the end of the stage. The game does slow down, of course, with so much going on, plenty of sprite flicker everywhere, but overall at least they don't look all that bad. If you're also quick enough, you can actually outrun a lot of these shots from the clams we're going through here, as I have to carefully maneuver around a couple more fish and the shark before finishing up Stage 5. Now, with that completed, we go back to Stage 1, now numbered as Stage 6, with absolutely no difference in the level as far as design or anything like that is concerned. And now we get to do all the levels again for the second cycle here in Super Donkey Kong. One of my favorite things, though, to do in this particular bootleg is seeing how many enemies I can jump over, or seeing, like, just how close I can cut a lot of the corners. Also, the animation for Donkey Kong, like, turning on the net, like, going from one piece of the net to the other, is really bad, but really hilarious looking at the same time. If you didn't notice it the 2 times I've done it, go back a few seconds of the video and just rewatch him on the net. Like, that sprite is quite glorious in its execution. Up here, climbing up this rope, we make another big jump over, watching out for a couple of snakes, and jump up here, where we finish up Stage 6 and move on to Stage 7. And while the music isn't necessarily Donkey Kong Country quality, they did at least try. I have heard worse sounds come out of a Famicom pirated card as well. It isn't saying much, but at least a couple of the tunes, not really the one in this level, but a couple of the other levels, it really isn't that awful to listen to. Whenever you do end up getting hit, you automatically switch over to the other character, whether you're Diddy or Donkey Kong. And of course, there's not really that many barrels set up, so you really only get the one usually at the very beginning of a stage. The game does not feature any continues though, so if you end up running out of lives at any point, it's a game over, and you're going to have to start back from the beginning. But then again, once you've completed the first 5 levels, beating them 3 times each really doesn't add much to the game. I just wanted to do so for completion's sake in this run. Once again, we travel to the snowy level here, with the music being from one of the other, like, jungle-based levels instead of actually being from, like, a snow-themed level in Donkey Kong Country, but at least it doesn't sound terrible. Either way, we can make some pretty good jumps and bounce off quite a lot of the enemies as we work our way up the icy cliff. There's only one spot in this level in particular that ends up being annoying, and it's near the end. When you end up jumping down this area here, you want to make sure you take your time, take out the enemy, and then do a big jump over to the right. The hit detection on the platform between that gap isn't the best, and usually if I bounce off the blue critter, gremlin guy, and then try to get over that gap, I end up falling right through the ground. Now back to the Aztec temple-themed type level. Probably my favorite as far as being able to quickly get through, as I found a lot of times I'm able to really combo jumps on top of enemies, which ends up being quite a bit of fun. The only real danger, real quick, is when you're right here. You gotta watch out for a couple of small gaps, that one guy jumping back and forth on the middle platform, but right after that, it's just a couple of bees, which are easy to avoid for the most part. And we quickly reach the end of the level and move on to the water-themed level for the second time. Just like last time, we're going to take pretty much the same exact path that we took the first time to try to get on through this level, outrunning a lot of the clams firing the triple shot spread shots up into the air. The hardest thing is just kind of making sure you stay high enough or low enough to avoid the fish in, like, the middle of the screen. The hardest enemy to avoid, though, is the spinning starfish blade of death, located like right here. These guys are supposed to be octopuses normally, but they kind of don't even spin here, and they just kind of look like a giant throwing star, kinda. And they don't even, like, rotate. They just kind of float and hover and come your way. There's a couple of them in the level, and they have set paths, so they're easy to avoid, but you still have to move relatively quickly while trying to get through some areas. The one here spawns and immediately just goes down. He just disappears away from you. Goes the opposite way that you're going to want to be going anyway, so at least that one doesn't even get in your way. Here, accidentally running into one of these fish, it's very easy to accidentally do so, especially when you're just trying to get a little bit off of the coral and just trying to float just a tiny bit so you can keep on moving. A lot of times I end up just hitting the button a little bit too hard and it ends up having me swim right directly into one of them. The final segment again, where we have to outrun a bunch more of the evil clams spewing up at us, but at the very end we just have a couple of fish. The one fish here that's going right below me right now, he goes like all the way to the edge of the screen, so if you're kind of waiting for him to go all the way over and then come back so that you can kind of get by easier, he takes forever to do so. Now we're finally on to the third and final loop here in Super Donkey Kong. I'm going to take a tiny shortcut here, and that's only because I was able to jump off the one guy up. I'm not able to do that every time when going through this, but thankfully I was able to do it there. Get my favorite animation of Donkey Kong slowly turning on the rope itself. Up here I'm going to bounce off a couple of snakes to get up to the platform here. To the left is a zinger, and then the one zinger right above us on the rope. Probably the one I've hit the most, because I try to quickly jump off the rope and up, and I end up clipping the bee right there, but right past a couple more snakes, boom, right to the end, and we're moving on to stage 12. While this isn't the best example of it, I do like the idea of taking established games from the later generations and trying to turn them into a game for an older system, like a demake. Like we've seen a few of these over the years kind of make their way out from the bootleg scene, such as the demakes of Super Mario World, demakes of Final Fantasy VII, which is a very interesting one, Resident Evil 1 being demade, and I recently discovered one for Legend of Zelda: Link to the Past, which I've just started working on, and I hope to one day be able to do for a video like this one. They don't always turn out that great, and are usually made just to kind of capitalize on something, but I just find the entire idea of that whole thing fascinating. One last time now through the snowy themed stage. Be careful on the slopes, as you do move pretty quickly on them. They actually were able to program that into the game, of having the slopes actually have different momentum and the like. But for the most part, we're still going to be just jumping our way over most of the enemies throughout the course of the level. Work our way up the large mountain, and then when we come on back down the mountain on the opposite side, we have to be a little bit careful not to fall into that one pit, like the one pit that could potentially stop you in this stage. Once we do pass that said pit, it's a pretty straightforward path for the rest of the level, and we can move on to stage 4 for the third time. Into the Aztec-themed level, watching out for the snake at the beginning, and a couple of the bees right back to back. You can see I can barely escape, but just quick jumping allows me to kind of bypass. Getting up here, you can actually kind of spring a little bit off the shield in the background. I don't know if that was just a glitch or whatever it may be, but that's the only time I was actually able to do that during the course of this run. Barely hanging on to the edge of the platform as I get past the 2 gaps, as that's all there are in the level. And then you have the gauntlet of bees and critters kind of going up and down during the segment before reaching the end of the level and moving on to the final stage. This time it is the final way through the water level, and we get to see the amazing ending to this title. As we head through, of course, the big open section at the beginning, there are those clams, like always, at the bottom, trying to shoot up at us. When we make it to the opening here, we're going to head on down, like always, past the spinning thing of death that doesn't spin in this version, and head over to the right here. If you're wondering, pretty much every path that I don't take, the ones with even bananas leading to them, sometimes the bananas just lead to a dead end as to trick you. It's something that doesn't get done, I don't think, in the normal Donkey Kong countries, but in this level, in this pirated version, they put a few sets of bananas that kind of lead you to dead ends. Swim up here and to the left, watching out for some fish and that one shark kind of here before heading back up the next corridor, which we get to then go past one fish and then the intersection that has 3 fish all kind of converged at once. Right past them though, we're going to head right through the next opening and through the final big hallway here of the level. At the end of it, of course, I'm going to try to sneak past the fish, trying to like float on either on the ceiling or the ground, whichever one you want to, like top or bottom. Get past the shark, which ends up clipping me just barely with his fin. But thankfully, I still have Diddy, and I can finish up the level, and here you go, here's the ending. There it is. I don't think you would expect anything more or anything better, but there you go, the ending to Super Donkey Kong. Wow. Just wow. But anyway, guys, that's going to wrap up this episode of Play It Through.